Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. Today's guest is Shelley Paxton. Shelley Paxton, as seen in PBS, Forbes, CBS, MarketWatch, and more, is a Chicago-based author, international speaker, and transformational coach. She spent 26 years as a highly regarded marketing and advertising executive, stewarding some of the world's most iconic brands, including Harley Davidson, Visa, McDonald's, and S.O.U.L. In 2016, she left the corporate world to launch her own company with the mission to liberate the souls of leaders and organizations by inspiring them to realize their greatest purpose and potential. As a certified professional coach, she works with executives at Fortune 100 companies and with fellow rebel soul individuals and entrepreneurs. She holds a marketing degree from Boston College and graduated from IPEC, one of the country's premier coaching certification programs. Paxton has trained with some of the top teachers in the world, including Brené Brown, 5 times New York Times best-selling author. I really enjoyed having Shelley on today. It was so good. It was perhaps one of the best podcasts I have ever done. And I really love the whole authenticity, getting in touch with your soul and what lights it up and what sucks it dry, and just living a life that you give yourself permission to live and being free to be who you are instead of who others are telling you you should be. Releasing people pleasing. She talks about what the principles of sabbatical are, and she has a whole cool thing for what S.O.U.L means and the framework. I cannot say enough about this conversation, you guys. I loved every minute and it wasn't long enough. So enjoy. I am so excited to welcome Shelley Paxton to the show.
Hello, Linda.
How are you today?
I'm fantastic, and I can't stop smiling since I've been starting talking to you. So I'm excited to hear where this goes.
Oh, I am more than excited. I was excited to interview you, but when I really started diving into the book you wrote, Sabbatical, I was blown away by a lot of the things you talked about, because it's things that are near and dear to my heart, and the message that I think so many of my listeners and women out there really need to hear. And so I'm glad you're here to bring it to us today.
Yes, I know we are so aligned in our messages. Like that, we were meant to connect. I'm really glad it's happening.
Oh my gosh. So I just want to kind of introduce the listeners to you in a way. Like you worked for Harley Davidson. Were you riding motorcycles? I mean, were you that girl?
I was that girl. Yeah,
I
the
love
funny
it.
thing is I hadn't ridden a motorcycle before I went to work there. So working there was like this whole new chapter of my life. I had just come out of like a crazy epic divorce, and I was piecing my life back together, and I was like, this is my opportunity to prove that Shelley Paxton, the badass rebel, is back. So I learned to ride a motorcycle, and I had this amazing job. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
I have to say, divorce kind of changes you. If anybody out there hasn't been through it, you probably don't know, but I didn't cuss before it. And then I was cussing like a sailor after it. Now I'm a little better, but I'm just saying, like, it's like you go through some kind of a transition. And I just had a laugh when I was reading your book earlier, the FU Fund you had. Can you tell us, what was the FU Fund?
Yeah, so after I got divorced, my divorce was pretty financially devastating for me because I was the breadwinner in our relationship. And so I was kind of putting the pieces back together again. And right when I went to Harley after the divorce, I went to a new financial advisor. And I said to him, hey, listen, I really need some help kind of like rebuilding my nest egg. And I want to create a fund on the side that is like, you know, F you to my ex-husband for, you know, not that he put me in that place, but, you know, for the divorce and the way it ended up and all of that. And F you to anything less than total fulfillment in my future. So I want to have this little, yes. And so I said, I didn't even know really what I was talking about at the time. I think I was more still kind of processing the anger and the rage from some of the things that happened in the process of the divorce. And so I just said, I want this little cushion because I want to know if this Harley thing doesn't work out, if maybe corporate America doesn't work out, I want to have a little nest egg to rely on. A little cushion is probably a better way to say it. So that's what the FU Fund, and it became the biggest joke between my financial advisor and I, and you know, he's in the book, you know, so we would talk about this all the time. And, you know, I spent 6.5 years at Harley, and they were 6.5 pretty good years in terms of the company's performance. I was able to start to put a few dollars away into that little cushion. So by the time, you know, the universe started ripping me out of my sleep saying, you are not living a life true to yourself, I knew I had that little nest egg to go back to and say, okay, you know what? Maybe I need to do something about this.
And I love what you said just now, a life not true to yourself. That is just so right on the money. I think many of us grew up thinking we have to be good little girls and not rock the boat and not have a voice, or possibly you're trying to please your friends, what they think you should do, be, or have, or your husband or your mate or your boyfriend, or this image that you think you have to hold on to. And you found yourself you're at the top of your career, Harley Davidson, you're like doing amazing. And then you make this decision that it isn't fulfilling your soul's calling. What was that all about? And how did that all take place?
Yeah, so it was, I mean, as you can imagine, and I know there are probably a lot of people listening to this who can relate, it was scary as hell, right? Because I was, you know, like you said, at the top of my game, and from the outside looking in, I had ticked all the boxes of traditional success. I looked like I had it all, and I had the perfect life, and I had the sexiest and coolest job because I was riding motorcycles around the world. Who wouldn't want that? Most people would give a limb to have that job. And the reality was, while I had all of that on the outside, I was feeling more and more empty, kind of emotionally and spiritually bankrupt on the inside. And it was really starting to gnaw at me. So what I was doing was like just keeping myself busy, and I was drinking a bottle of wine every night, and I was trying to just tamp down. You know, one of my favorite coaching questions is, what are you pretending not to know? Because we have those feelings inside, and what we're like professionals at ignoring them. So I was ignoring this little voice on the inside that was just saying, you're out of alignment with yourself. You're out of integrity. You are living somebody else's dream. But honestly, I felt guilty about it because I thought, I've worked a quarter of a century in the corporate world to get to this place. This is the dream. But yet every morning I was like, is this all there is? So I was having those feelings, and to be honest, I was ignoring all of those feelings. So what ended up happening, and as you know, this is where the book starts, the universe decided it was going to wake me up. I called the chapter Getting Woke, literally. Because the universe, it's like, you know, that little voice inside us, like it whispers to us, and then it shouts. And then if that doesn't happen, you're going to get like whacked in the solar plexus by a 2x4. And that's what it was for me. I started having this incredibly painful nightmare night after night after night that was tearing me out of my sleep and basically forcing me to see my dog who had passed away during the divorce, and thinking in my nightmare that he's still alive and he's malnourished and neglected and he's not being fed or nurtured. And I realized what I was seeing was a proxy for my soul.
That is such a good story. I'm going to hop back just a little bit in your book, because I really feel a lot of the listeners will identify with some of these feelings. I know I personally did, because whenever you're telling yourself a story, it's usually fear-based. If you're in a horrible relationship and you're afraid to leave, or you're in a job that makes you miserable. And I think, where you said you were afraid you'd be alone the rest of your life. And, when you did have the success, you were afraid you're going to be exposed, like the imposter syndrome, and that you'd been chasing someone else's dream. How many of us have been guilty of that? Like, where you get distracted and think, this is what I'm supposed to do, or that looked shiny and I'm chasing this dream, but is this really even mine? Or you're shitting yourself to death.
Right. That's my favorite part of the book, is like shooting all over myself, right? And we all know that. So many of us, it's like the number one regret of the dying is I lived the life that others expected me to live, not the life that was true to me. I didn't have the courage to live that life. And so Soulbatical is kind of the antidote to that, right? It's the get really clear on who you are and start blazing your own trail. Live a life that's more authentic, more courageous, more on purpose. And what I love to say is, big part of Soulbatical is slowing down so we can get to know ourselves, so we can listen deeply to that inner voice inside of us. And then once we know who we are, what we want, and the impact that we want to have in the world, we can start rebelling for those things.
I love what you said. It's not like about leaving your job. Like, I know so many people out there that are so like miserable with their job that they do and the work that they do. It's about finding yourself. So when it had to be scary to take this leap. How did you find your identity again? You lost it somewhere. How did you find it?
Yeah, a lot of hard work, a lot of crying. So that's the short answer. The long answer is, yes, it was super, super scary, but I have to say, like, the important thing is, yes, I chose to take this leap. I chose to kind of flip the desk and say, I'm going to become chief soul officer of my own life. I'm going on this journey called a Soulbatical because I want to invest in the possibility of my future self. And I started to realize that I had been neglecting myself. I'd been serving and pleasing everyone else. Even as a rebel, it was so strange to realize that I was constantly pleasing others and serving the corporate agenda. I was more willing to disappoint myself than I was to disappoint anybody else. And I thought, you know what? Life is short. Life is short. I want to understand what I'm all about, get reconnected. And what would it be like to steward the most iconic brand in the world, the Shelley Paxton brand? Because
that is just like everything right there in that statement.
Yeah. And for me, especially as a marketer, I had to flip that in my head to really come to terms with the fact that, like, wait a second, what if that's the most important work I could do in the world, is understand who I am? Because where I lost my identity, to get back to your question, is I lost my identity in service of these other brands, because I always thought there was more value in serving Harley Davidson and serving Visa and serving AOL and McDonald's and all these big brands, that I lost Shelley Paxton as a part of that. And I think so many of us can relate to our version of that. It's almost like we get hidden in the shadows of these things we're propping up, and we forget about us. So a big part of my identity work was reminding myself, and I was actually just thinking about a passage in the book. I'll see if I can find it while we're talking. I think would be really relevant to read. But as part of my soulbatical journey, I had to do that identity work. I had to go strip myself all the way back to the beginning of what am I at my core? What is the essence of the Shelley Paxton brand? And remind myself, I am bold. I am beautiful. I am funny. I am talented. I am sexy. I am all these things. I'm not titles. I'm not brands. I am not some long list of accomplishments. I am who I am, and I am all these beautiful qualities. And I did this work. This was like good preparation for the quarantine situation we're in now, because I did this work while I was quarantined in a little cottage in New Zealand, and there was this epic monsoon outside for like 5 days. I couldn't go anywhere. I didn't know anyone. I just kind of kept my little pile of food in this cottage and like watched everything go sideways and the ocean practically come to my doorstep. And yet it was the most profound opportunity for me to turn inwards. And I think there is a parallel to a lot of what we're experiencing in the world right now with the coronavirus. And I went
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's time to reflect and really think about your life as it is right now. And is this the life you want to live, right? Because in the book you said, if I continue to live the life I was living, would I be closer to who I want to be or further away? And I really feel like that is a question we should all ask ourselves at some point.
So true. It's so true. And it is actually one of the questions in the book. So as you know, the way the book is structured is that at the end of each section, and there are 4 sections, I didn't want this to be a pure memoir. I said, I want this to be part memoir, part manifesto, like let's all lock arms and become chief soul officers of our own lives, and part interactive guide, so that as the reader is going through my story, and I tell a very messy warts and all story, and I do it very intentionally because we live in a world where we compare our insides to other people's outsides. And I wanted to be very, very clear. I wanted to show how messy this is. And I also wanted to show that it could have been so easy, and I think for so many people it was, to look at me and think, she's got it all. Her life is perfect. She has everything figured out. And the reality is I didn't. And I was scared to talk about it. And I was scared to go on this journey. And I wanted to share that very vulnerably. So this is you go through the light and the dark as you go through on this journey with me. And I thought it was really important to say that, because I want everybody to know, like, it's okay to get messy. It's okay, because that's often like, there's a sort of an old adage that says the message is in the mess. And that's what I did. I just allowed myself to get really messy and kind of like strip back to the basics. And like you said, reflect and reset. And the reflection part was getting really, really clear on who I am at my core, what my values are. And this is something I would recommend to everybody. If you've never sat down and tried to articulate what your top 2 or maximum 3 values are, that can then be the lens through which you make all of the decisions in your life, sit down and try it. It's hard. And when you actually then come to understand what those are, so for me, I was like, oh my God, it's freedom, authenticity, and courage. And mind you, I was doing all this for the book. So there's a reason why freedom, authenticity, and courage are big themes in this.
Those are big ones for me as well.
Oh, that's not a surprise. I knew we were kindred spirits. So when I realized that, it was such an aha moment. It was like a lightning strike. I went, so all these years, freedom has been one of my top values, and yet I've been trying to be happy in corporate America, right? That I was chasing freedom in different ways. And believe me, I don't have any regrets. My 26 years in the corporate world was amazing. I feel very privileged. I have such good fortune. I worked for those brands. It took me around the world. I've ridden motorcycles from Brazil to South Africa, like the most incredible, not literally, because obviously lots of water is in between those two, but you know, across like countries and continents. And I've been to so many fabulous places and met so many incredible people. Like, I don't regret any of that. It got me where I am today. But I think we also have to be honest with ourselves when it's like we're not listening to that little voice that says there's something bigger, there's something different, that this is not your path, right? It's time for you to start blazing your own path. And a lot of times, I mean, we don't know what that looks like when we start out on the journey. I had no idea. I gave myself a title. I created Chief Soul Officer because I knew in those days, if I didn't have a title, I wouldn't take it seriously. So I gave myself a job to really, really reconnect with and nurture my soul. And it
Wow.
worked.
You know, there's charm in that. There's charm in not knowing everything. It's like a movie. You don't know how it's going to unfold. But I love the chapter, if not now, then when. I know so many people need to hear that right now. If not now, then when are you going to think about making your life the way you want to live it?
And I honestly, to be super provocative, I think that's exactly the question people need to hear right now in this moment in the world that we're living in. Because, you know, people say, return to, you know, when are we going to return to normal? And my view, and I'm suspecting that you are like-minded in this sense, my view is, you know what? Normal wasn't so great. There was a lot of stuff in normal, in our culture, in our personal lives, in business, that wasn't so great. You know, we're a culture that's riddled with unhappiness and burnout and skyrocketing depression rates and suicide rates. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff to fix. So what if this is the moment? What if this is the moment to start turning things around and to start shaping what we want to create and the lives we want to live and the culture, business and otherwise, that we want to be a part of? That gets me excited.
And I really love that. I was listening to a sermon from Elevation Church, and it's in North Carolina where my son lives in Charlotte. And he talked all about that, you know, it's like going back to Egypt. All these things that we said we didn't like, that we don't want to do, but they're comfortable. So we want to run right back to them when things get tough. And I think we think of normal, like, well, what is normal? Is normal being miserable at work? Is normal being in a miserable relationship? Is normal being unhappy and unfulfilled? Do you really want to that normal, or would you like to create a new normal? Because there is going to be a new normal after this. I don't think things are going to go back exactly the same. But the truth of the matter is we have the potential to create our own normal, or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, and I'm like you. I don't even, the word normal, I even say this somewhere in the book because I think my dad ended up having 2 strokes, which is what I talk about in this chapter, if not now, then when, which was a huge wake up call for me and a reminder like, oh girl, this is the path that you're on. You are never turning back. You are not going to waste this precious life not doing what you are called to be doing. And it's my dad would, as he was starting his recovery from these 2 strokes, he would always ask, when will I be normal again? And I remember telling him, and I forget exactly what I wrote, but the essence of the idea is, what is normal anyway? Is that really what we want to aspire to? I don't aspire, maybe this is the rebel in me, but I don't aspire to anything normal. I don't understand it. Like, I aspire to extraordinary. I aspire to light my soul on fire. I aspire to, you know, passionate, you know, all of these things. So this is where I really truly believe we have an opportunity right now. So it's like, okay, call it the old normal, but the old normal wasn't so great. Maybe there's some things we want from the old normal to bring into the new normal. But the reality is I kind of want to get rid of the word normal, period, and just say, okay, that was one chapter. Now we've had a big moment of disruption. What do we want to create going into this next chapter? And that feels super empowering to me. I've been saying in this moment, like, there's one thing I know for sure. Every crisis comes to teach us something. We know that from experience. We know that from history. So we know we're going to learn and grow. As painful and scary and uncertain as this moment is in our world today, we know we're going to grow as a result of it. So what if we sat back and said, how do I want to consciously embrace growth in this moment? What does that look like?
Disruption is definitely a time and a catalyst for change. And like you said, what can you take from this moment? I think there's always a gift in the mess if you look for it.
Yeah. Well, to tie this to the chapter you referenced in the book, I just want to share with everyone one of the most beautiful gifts. It's really hard for me to say. My dad had 2 strokes, and it was an incredible gift. And yet here's the gift in the pain. The gift in the pain for me, actually for my entire family, happened one day, months after the strokes. We finally got my parents down full time to their place in Naples, Florida. And I was sitting outside. My dad, and this guy was like the healthiest guy in the world, went down from a severe brain hemorrhage and lost his ability to walk, talk, speak, read, write, swallow, you name it. He kind of like went back to the beginning. And he was previously like CEO and chairman and this like uber successful guy. So I'm sitting there with him by the pool, and he is trying to get his command of vocabulary back. And suddenly he has this really lucid moment. And he tells me the story after the second stroke, when it was like he was on the threshold of death. And he was holding my hand, and he said to me, I made the choice to live. And I was like, say more. What does that mean? I didn't even know. I assumed his brain was so damaged that he didn't really even know what he had gone through. And yet he had this very conscious moment where he said he realized that his time was coming to an end. And at first he said, you know what? It's my time to go. I've done everything I wanted to do from a career standpoint. It's been amazing. I've raised this beautiful family. My family's going to be okay without me. It's time for me to go. And then a couple days later, he said he started to think about it more, and he had this realization. And he looked at me and said, I realized I had to stay because I wanted to do different work in the world. This was my time to do different work. And it just blew me away. And in that moment, I said to him, I understand all of this now. My journey, your journey, we both have been living business our entire lives. And now it's time for us to shift to the business of living.
I love that. And it is a conscious choice to live. You're alive, but are you truly living? Being miserable is not truly living.
Amen to that.
I love where you say in the book, loving my soul is loving myself. How can we love our soul more?
Oh, the first thing, and I want everybody to do this right now, especially in this moment in time, is listen to it. The first thing we need to do is simply be with it. Get still, listen deeply, start reconnecting. Because I think for a lot of us, and this was 100% my story, I was so disconnected. It was like I was living completely out of alignment with myself. So one of the first things I did was, as I learned how to get to not be busy, to slow down, I tuned in and I found what I now call my soul signal, right? There's so much noise out there. There's everybody telling you who to be and what to do and all the shoulds. And even today with the coronavirus pandemic, it's like there's a lot of noise. The biggest gift we can give to ourselves is to tune in and get back in touch with our own sort of natural GPS system and listen to what it has to say. And then once we start listening and understanding that, starting to nurture the things that we hear. So one of the big messages from me was my creative soul felt like it was dying. Like, Shelley, you used to do improv, you loved photography, you do all of these things. Like, where did that all go? What you've just been like completely dismissing this whole part of who you are as a human and what lights your soul on fire. So the commitment I made to myself, just to give everybody an example, is I said, you know what? There are 3 things that I love, that I could do forever. One is traveling, one is writing, and one is photography. And so my first baby steps were simply saying, I'm going to spend some time nurturing my creative soul. And by taking steps toward writing a little bit more, playing with photography a little bit more, traveling to some really inspirational places, I'm just going to start to see what happens. Like, what synchronicity starts to fire up in the universe, and see where it leads me. But I believe that's a way we can start.
In the book, you have the, you know, this kind of formula for soul. Can you tell us what the initials all stand for?
Yeah, so soul is, so I created what I call the soul framework. So like I said, there's some hard work that I'm asking the reader of this book to do, and some kind of doing a little mining of their own soul and their own story. And so I wanted to make sure that as you have insights coming up from the questions that you're answering, that there's a framework to say, like, okay, now what do I do with this? Because sometimes those insights can be super paralyzing, right? It's like, okay, now I understand this truth, and it's like, I'm just holding my breath because I don't know what to do with it. And so I created this acronym. So SOUL is an acronym for show up, own it, unleash it, and live it. And I can talk a little bit about each one of these, but here's the key. The reason I created this is because I want to help everyone go from having an insight from doing this deep work to putting it into intention and action. So it's a way to start to get into motion, because that's actually how things get done. That's how the universe starts to open up doors. We have to get into motion around these things, around what we believe. We have to get into motion around what the future self that we want to live into, right? And do it before we're ready. So that's a big part of what I talk about. So show up is, it's time for us to show up for ourselves. And show up for myself means show up for who I truly am and what I truly want. I always say authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. So go rebel for who you are and what you want.
Oh my God, I love it. That is so good. Say it one more time.
Yeah, authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. So get clear on who you are and what you want, and then start rebelling for it. So that first S, so that S is show up. Like, really stop hiding and playing small and own the bigness of who you are and who you are meant to be in the world. So that's the first step, is just stating aloud the truth that you want to create in service of your authentic self. And sometimes that's hard, right? It's going to feel scary to play bigger, to get out of that sandbox that we've been in for so long. So once you start to do that, the O is own it. And the own it thing, I think, is really, really challenging for all of us as humans, because the own it is believing it yourself. So the way I like to think about this is like repeat the truth again and again and again until you believe that it's possible. And then accept responsibility for making it happen. But it's not going to be believed in the world, and nothing's going to come of it if you don't believe it. So we have an opportunity here to also evict any competing stories in our heads, right? We have lots of stories that are going on like, well, I can't do that, or I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I'm too this, or I'm too that, or I don't have enough money, or whatever. We have all those stories all the time. Evict any of those stories that are not serving your authentic self and really, really sink into believing it. And then we go on to the U, which is unleash it. And by unleash it, I mean, this is the step at which we put our intentions into the universe, put very clear intentions, and start sharing your truth with other people, and specifically with people who will support you, inspire you, mentor you. I mean, find people who are resonating at the same energy frequency that you are, right? Don't find people who don't understand what you're doing, who are questioning it. I mean, I had an entire professional network who thought I had lost my mind because I left Harley Davidson and the coolest job on the planet. And yet I went in search of people who were paving their own path, blazing their own trails, living life on their own terms, because I wanted to know what that looked like and how I could also do it for myself.
I love that. And I think you got to write those limited beliefs down sometimes, like so that you can clearly see them.
Absolutely. Name them, shine a spotlight on them. It's like what Brene Brown talks about with shame. It's like it cannot survive in the white hot spotlight, and neither can our limiting beliefs. So let's name them, shine a spotlight on them, and then evict, say, thank you, you've served me before, but no longer. You don't serve me now in terms of who I am becoming and the truth of me. And then you take that, and the L is live it. And the important part of live it, well, there are two pieces, right? Live the idea of who you want to become or what you want to create in the world before you're ready. And that catches us all in this place. Like, we have so many excuses, and I had excuses for years about why I was staying and doing what I was doing. And there were a lot of ways in which that served me. You know, it was a big job. It was an amazing experience. It took me around the world. It got me on a badass motorcycle, right? But at the same time, that's not where my growth and my purpose and my calling and all of the magic was going to happen. That was me stepping into the truth of me, the truth of really getting to know myself before I was ready. And there's never a perfect time. I think, you know, that sounds cliche sometimes to say, but there really isn't. There's no perfect time. There's not a perfect, you know, dollar amount or weight or beauty or answer or whatever it is, right? We have to, I say a lot, like, I live my life in trust and surrender.
You had to let go of all those things that you think you should be to embrace who you truly are.
Exactly.
So much. Oh gosh, this has been so good today. Oh my gosh, I'm just like, we don't have enough time.
Oh my God, are we already? I feel like only 5 minutes has passed by. Good Lord, we've been talking for a while. That's so funny. I love it.
Oh my gosh. And really, it's just, I think authenticity, when you're not being authentic or somebody is punishing you in your life for being who you truly are, I just feel like your true soul is screaming out within. And if you just listen to it, like you said, it's letting you know that you're not living in integrity with yourself. And how do we step into that deeper integrity like you did?
I think one, we have to get clear on what it is, right? I think sometimes we're just not clear. So spend that time listening to that voice And then there's an exercise I love to do, and I think it's really perfect to do at this moment in time in the world right now. It's kind of a life audit, and I call it the soul fuels versus the soul sucks exercise. And I don't know if you remember that from the book, but so the idea is write down, just take a blank sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle. And the left column is soul fuels. What are those things that just light you up, that you're super passionate about? People, places, things, activities, and just write like 10-minute stream of consciousness, everything you can think of, everything that comes through you. And on the right-hand side of the paper, that's what I call soul sucks. Those are the things that drain.
I love that. Soul
right?
fuel and soul suck. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And so those are the things that are like, you're doing out of obligation, you're doing out of guilt. They just zap you of energy. It feels, an hour feels like a year, all of that stuff. Same thing. Do just 10 minutes stream of consciousness. Write all the things that you feel like, people, places, things, activities that are just like sucking your soul, sucking your energy. And then when you're done with that exercise, just take a step back and look at that list. Look at which one of the lists is longer. That's always very interesting. Look at what surprises you, what scares you, what inspires you. You know, you can sit there and think like, what do I want more of? What do I want less of? You know, what are some things that I did this exercise actually in a TV interview, and the woman was like, I don't even know where this thing came from, but it was on her soul fuels list. And she's like, clearly I need to be doing more of that. I forget what it was, but it was like hiking or something. She's like, it's sometimes like this subconscious stuff starts to just come out. So it's a really good way to kind of get to some of your truth and then start thinking about, okay, well, wait a second. What are those things I'm doing simply out of guilt and obligation? How do I get rid of some of those so I can create more space for what lights me on fire? And how can I create more space for taking baby steps? One of my favorite phrases is, I wrote this in the book, every badass accomplishment is a series of tiny steps. So, you know, we tend to look and go, oh my God, you know, overnight success, or she's a badass or whatever. Well, I'm 50 years old. I have 50 years of experience. Every step I took along the way got me here. And so this is a way to start taking steps toward creating that life that's going to fuel you, creating a life of what I call soulfillment, right? It's not just fulfillment, but it's like that joy and that energy every single day. So this is a good exercise to start with, and it's a great one to be doing in lockdown, because it's the right time to just take an audit of your life. What's working? What's not working? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? Here's one of my favorite questions. You read this in the exercises, but I always say, what would change in your life right now if you were being 100% true to you?
Oh my God, that is just right to the heart of things right there.
That's a biggie, right? I mean, it feels like, whoo, it's heavy. And yet when you start to just like get stuff out, it becomes really liberating. And that's what I'm all about. I'm all about liberating souls. I want more people to become chief soul officer of their own life, which is simply an invitation to what's possible and what you can create.
Oh,
And yeah, that one starts to unlock it, because all of us, even in this moment in time, I can answer that question. Like, there's a lot of stuff that my life is a constant evolution. I'm living definitely in integrity and in alignment. And yet there's even more I want to do to make my life and create my life even more authentically and even more courageously. Like, there's always more steps.
I love the title of chapter 8, Liberating from the Shackles of Should. And you're talking about liberation right now. And, you know, there's probably somebody out there, they're in a relationship that they're committed to, but they're freaking miserable. And they're wondering if being miserable is a good enough reason to get out of that relationship. And I just think diving into this book is going to help free you from so many things. There's so much truth, so many good nuggets in your book today, Shelley, that where are people going to be able to get this book?
Yeah, I mean, you can get it anywhere. Although right now, I know Amazon considers books a non-essential item, and that's fair. So you can order through like your favorite local bookstore. You can order through a Barnes and Noble or an Amazon. What I recommend is going to a site called bookshop.org that the publishers put together. So when you order from there, it ships directly from the publisher, and the proceeds go to help local independent bookstores survive during this difficult time when they're closed.
Oh, well,
So
that's amazing.
yeah, that would be my number one recommendation. So that's bookshop.org, and you can just search for Soulbatical like you would for any book, and then choose how you want to buy it. So that's number one. People can go to my website. If any of this is interesting and you want to dig a little bit deeper, go to soulbatical.com. And just so everyone knows, Soulbatical is spelled with 2 B's and 1 T because I made up a crazy word and I decided to spell it that way. And Instagram is my playground. So my handle is at Soulbatical on Instagram, and I have a lot of fun there. And you can also find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect as a business professional. I'm Shelley Paxton on LinkedIn. But and also I talked about I think I mentioned I do a newsletter called S.O.U.L that I publish the first Sunday of every month. And it's just what's inspiring me, what's lighting my soul on fire. And FUEL is an acronym for fascinating, underlining, experiencing, and listening. So I talk about what are those things in my life that I want to share with my community. So anybody who's looking for more soul fuel, sign up. It's on the homepage of my website. So you get kind of some of the good nuggets like we just talked about today.
And I love that. And I love this part in your book. I am all about it. It's like literally painted on my wall because I have all these sayings at my gym, the Sisterhood of Sweat, that just I want to boost people up and just really help them. And I know when they're working out, that's the time these sayings sink in. And you said you are the chief soul officer of your own life. You have a lifetime supply of pink permission slips for whatever your soul desires. Use them liberally to pursue whatever joy and fulfillment you want to achieve. How can they become the soul CEO? How can they become that soul CEO of their life? Give me 3 tips.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so the first one is, and this is a choice, right? So I would say just christen yourself Chief Soul Officer of your life. This is a choice to say, you know what? I'm going to start living and showing up for myself differently. So the first thing you can do after you place that crown on your head, give yourself that title, is we don't ask for permission. Like you just said, we give ourselves permission. And so I start every day, I'm showing you this because you can see me, but with orange Post-it notes. Orange is my favorite color. It's the color of the book. And I ask myself a question every morning. I learned this from Brene Brown, who I studied with. She says, what do I need to give myself permission to do, to feel, or to not do in order to show up as my most authentic, courageous, and powerful self today?
And I freaking love Brene Brown. It's just so crazy because
Talk
I
about
wrote her on my top 100 guest list of people that I dream to have on my show.
Yes, she's amazing. I got to, I'm a certified Dare to Lead facilitator. So her most recent book and I just love her whole movement around wholehearted leadership and courageous cultures, and it's so symbiotic with Soulbatical and everything I'm talking about. So that idea of permission is really important. So first of all, give yourself permission to own the title Chief Soul Officer. I want more and more of us living into that title because you'll start to prioritize your own soul and your own desires and your own needs simply by holding that title. And then give yourself permission. And then choose courage over comfort. right? Get really, really clear that this isn't an easy road. But I think it's easier to show up as your authentic self in the world. Authenticity is the truest form of rebellion, right? That this is the opportunity to choose courage, to choose growth, to choose putting your true self in the world, however scary that might feel, because that's actually where the magic happens, right? And I mean, to speak of Brene, one of her other things that I love, she says, you can't be brave and certain at the same time.
Oh, yes.
So you know what, people? We're choosing uncertainty. And that's part of the other reason why I'm being provocative in this moment in time, in the middle of this pandemic. I'm being provocative to say it is uncertain.
Right.
It is. And
It
what if we
is. But life really is uncertain if you
life is
really
always
think about it.
uncertain. Life is always uncertain. A job is never guaranteed, right? Nothing is ever guaranteed. Life is uncertain. So what if we choose to lean into that uncertainty, to put ourselves out there? And so that to me is another way that you show up as a chief soul officer, right? I think it's really, really important. And the other thing is, we do believe that authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. So remind yourself of that every morning, right? Remind yourself that you are rebelling for who you are, what you want, and the impact that you want to have in the world. And it's your unique voice. We need it in the world. Your gifts and your talents. So those are 3 simple things that I like to talk about that start to get us on a path to fulfillment and a path to creating a life that is just super rewarding, to be honest.
And I love all of your tips. And it just reminds me of when I stood in line. I had my hamstring reattached. I was on a scooter at Lewis House. 3 weeks after my surgery, I'm harnessed, and I'm really not wanting to stand in that line. And normally I'd be full of questions because that's what I am, an interviewer, a journalist, at heart. But I didn't ask any questions in the audience, and I'm standing there and I thought, well, if I would have asked a question of the number 1 motivational speaker in the world, Eric Thomas, who I'm standing in line getting ready to meet, what would I have asked him? And it was, if someone's holding you back in your life, what do you do when someone's holding you back in your life to get permission to do the things, basically? And I'm standing there, and the answer just came to me was, you don't need to ask somebody for permission. You need to give yourself permission. It's all about you. You either give away your permission to somebody else to hold you back, or you give it to yourself to go ahead and do the things or move forward and be authentic.
Yes, I love that. Like, give yourself permission. We ask, especially as women, we keep asking other people for permission.
And waiting for permission.
Seeking for permission, waiting for permission. No, we take the power and we give ourselves permission.
Right, because it's your own life. It's your life. God gave it to you. And I always say this, if he wanted someone else to live that life, he would have given it to them. So it's really, truly your responsibility to live the authentic life that you were given.
Yeah. And I think giving yourself permission is showing up for yourself, and stop disappointing yourself. Stop being so scared of disappointing other people. Be more afraid of disappointing yourself. That shift alone was a radical shift for me, because I was so always at the ready to disappoint myself so that I could please somebody else. Just flip that conversation. And also, here's another one that I remember. So maybe this is tip number 4, but I always say self first isn't selfish. And self-worth trumps net worth every day of the week. And as chief soul officers, we know this. The old adage, put your oxygen mask on first, right? It goes so much deeper than that. People talk about self self-care, radical self-care. I've kind of elevated it to radical self-commitment. That radical self-commitment is really powerful. That's commitment to staying in integrity, staying in alignment with my authentic self, living true to my values.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Choosing courage over comfort, right? I'm going to do the hard thing. I'm going to do the hard thing because that's the authentic thing. And that's the thing that's going to blaze the trail, right? The trail only I can blaze for myself.
There you go. And I just want to say hallelujah, amen to all of that. And this has been so good. I hate to have to go now, but I just want to just acknowledge you so much for just being such a true, pure soul and just giving to everybody today.
I feel profoundly in service, and I hope everybody took a little nugget or two away, because I want to see an army of chief soul officers in this world. And Linda, thank you, because I feel like you are one and you are a kindred spirit. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Sweat. Bye, everybody.